Okay, our last talk in this session is Tamir Shechter, and he's talking on the effect of soil tillage equipment on recharge capacity of infiltration ponds. Ido Negev, sorry. Tamir is one of his partners.
Okay. We're talking about the Shaftdown Plant, which is one of the biggest in its kind in the world, for soil aquifer treatment plant. For the last more than 40 years, deliver complete solution for all the Dan region sewage, more than 2.5 million people, complete treatment and recycling of sewage, annual recharge of about 120 to 130 million cubic meter, annual recovery of 130 to 160 million cubic meter, a very high quality of reclaimed water for unlimited irrigation. And as we all know, the MAR advantage of a seasonal and multi-annual operative reservoir. Please go ahead. Everything nice, but I'm here to tell you a story about a crisis. Crisis that began somewhere in 2015, where you see two opposite trends. On the top, on the green, you see the effluents goes to the plant, increasing amounts of effluents that we need to recharge. But on the other end, in the blue line, you can see the decreasing amount of effluents that we are actually managed to recharge. As a consequence, of course, what you see in the orange is the increasing amounts of effluents that we must discharge, basically to the sea, reaching height of about 15 million cubic meter at the end of 2017. Crisis requires some answer, and for this we gathered a very small team in Mekorot to think of some possible causes. We hypothesize a few of them here, maybe some long-range decrease of infiltration rates, maybe there are presence of clay layers in the ponds, maybe decreasing of effluent quality, decreasing of drying periods, inadequate recharge regime or lack of monitoring and controlling system. And last, maybe inadequate tillage tools and tillage regime. I bolded the parameters that we decided to tackle first. Some of them on a full scale because it's a crisis, so it's the decreasing of effluent quality. We try to give some immediate solution for this, or decreasing of drying periods between flooding cycle, or the lack of monitoring and controlling system, giving a full-scale solution. And some of them, we did some large-scale experiments. Please go ahead. Which I will talk about the tillage, inadequate tillage tools and tillage regime. Go ahead. First, what we offer is to work with a new tillage regime after some consulting with experts and with farmers. But what you should know about the concept of tillage and maintenance the ponds, first that we are working basically in two type of tools. The shallow tools, which can be a cultivator or discus, but the thing is to it cope with the surface crust and maybe with the seasonal weeds, and it's applied maybe every 2 or 3 weeks. And then the deep tillage going up to 50, 60 centimeter, usually we are using plow. So on the right side is what we use now, basically the sweep cultivator, okay, as a shallow tools, and the plow as the deep tool. What we kept the same concept, but we decided to change the tool. Instead of a sweep knife cultivator, goes to a chisel knife cultivator with a little bit increase the depth instead of 20 centimeter, 30 centimeter. And instead of plow, going work with subsoiler. Beside of this, we also decided to check the tractor, use a stronger tractor using some control systems such as a depth control system and GPS navigation system, working with wider tools in order to minimize passes over the fields. One important question, the question of even surface versus wavy surface. I know in many places the recommendation is working, the surface of the ponds should be wavy in order to increase surface area, etc. Some interesting answer for this question at the end. And I think one of the most important things is the right preparation of the ponds before tillage, meaning complete drying. Please go ahead. We choose one of our site, the size of about Yavne 2, okay? It's total size of about 200 dunam, which is 20 hectare, divided into 9 operative ponds. So each one of about 15 dunam size. The one in blue are the ones that are used for the new tools, and the one in green, the ones that use for the existing tool as a control. But basically, we have much more controls than these 3, and I will explain a little bit later. And in 4 of them, okay, control and treatment, we also run some soil compaction measurement. Please go ahead. These are the measure parameters during the experiments, infiltration rates in 2 different methods, independent. Recharge amounts, wetting and drying periods, which is all data that we collected, soil compaction, which is actually the depth of the compacted layer, and soil profile analysis. I bolded the parameters that I will have time to discuss now. Please go ahead. The experiment is divided into 4 main cycles with a pre-experiment cycle. So actually it started at the end of May, ended at September, so it's a summer experiment. The first and the second cycle are cycles that we use the existing tools, okay, the plowing and the cultivator. And then the next 2 cycles are the ones that we compare between the new tools and the existing tools, first chiseled cultivator versus the sweep cultivators, and then the subsoilers versus the plowing. We also have a pre-experiment cycle, which is at the beginning of May. They plow all these ponds without giving any special instruction from us, just routinely. So we can also refer to this cycle. Please go ahead. These are continuous measurements in representative ponds. I just, for you, demonstrate the result in 2 ponds. One of them is the existing tool, which is the control. What you see is after the pre-treatment season, when we start the experiment with proper preparation of the field, the plowing increased dramatically the infiltration rates. And then the cultivator, the existing cultivator, keep the same infiltration rate. The second cycle of cultivator, after about 3 weeks, we see some reduction in infiltration rates, and then another plowing, which managed to recover the infiltration rates to about the same size of when we started the experiment. On the bottom, you see the amounts of the recharge amount and the rate, which is accumulated. Please go ahead. And now let's compare it to the new tools, the effect of the new tools. First of all, the first 3 cycles are about the same because we're using actually the same tools. The differences started in the 3rd cycle, where you see the chisel knife cultivator managed to even increase infiltration rates, okay, in compared to what was before. Definitely not decrease it like the control ponds. And the joker is the subsoiler, which dramatically increased the infiltration points, and you see it also in the rate of the accumulated recharge amount. Please go ahead. In order to summarize all our replicates together, we calculate the relative change in infiltration rate relative to the first plowing. And then we can calculate average because of the environmental variability. Not all of them act the same. So now we can calculate the average, and you see the first plowing, of course, is 1 because this is the reference, and then the sweep cultivator didn't change a lot, the first cycle. And then from the third cycle, you see the change of the chisel cultivator, which is increased about 15% the infiltration rate in compare to the first plowing. Definitely much more in compared to the second cultivator, the existing. And the result of the subsoiler, which increased the infiltration rates in about 100% in compared to everything. Go ahead. This is the result of the depth of the soil compaction layer, which you see that after subsoiler, it's increased from around 30 centimeter to about 50 to 60, about 55 centimeter. At the picture on the right hand above, you can see what I talked about, the wavy shape, which create mainly after the plow, okay? But after you run the cultivator, the wide cultivator, and the subsoiler, the soil is flat. You don't see this wave, okay? So the new tools concept, okay, enable us first to increase the depth of the compacted layer, or actually to break the compacted layer that was at the depth of 30 centimeter. And second, to increase the uniformity of the field, which leads to a more efficient tillage. Please go ahead. Okay, so the conclusion, first of all, the new tillage tool together with the correct tillage regime significantly increased the recharge capacity up to 100% improvement. Results were immediate with almost no additional cost. I want to emphasize the importance of proper preparation of the fields, mainly complete drying. Even if you should wait 2 or 3 days before it's completely dry, wait, because otherwise the tillage is not efficient. Also emphasize the importance of working with wide tools in order to minimize the passes over the fields, to avoid the compaction, and to increase the surface uniformity. Importance of the even soil surface over the wavy formation, which lead to an uneven tillage. Okay, this I think why this wavy formation is not so good. Above other reasons, which I'm not going to into it now. I think this is a very important conclusion, at least for me, that short and long range clogging process can be reversible with the right treatment. Further experiments, seasonal effects, of course, because it was a summer experiment. We should check it in the winter, which we already did during December until February, and get about the same result. And the weed control practices, we should find something more efficient. Please go one more. Now, if you ask yourself if we manage to solve the crisis or not, so this is the answer. You see the end, 2017, the height of the discharge, and then the end of 18, the next year, we finish with the largest amount that we recharge in the last 10 years, about 127, 12 million above what we recharged year before. And the end of, we expected 2019, this year, according to results that we already have until today actually, to finish it almost with no recharge and with no discharge, and a recharge of about 135 million cubic meter, which was never recharged before. That's about it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks for that, Ido. Great talk, and it's great that I know Israel is doing some fantastic work in managed aquifer recharge, and it's great that you could share that with us today. So does anybody have any questions for Ido?
Danny.
Yeah, what is a subsoiler in comparison to a regular plow?
Subsoiler, first of all, unlike plow, which go to a deep layer, but like taking the soil and turn it upside down.
Yeah, okay.
And that's why I think it's also have a very strong compaction effect, because it's need to the resistance of the soil in the bottom. Subsoil just go underneath to the depth that you can define, and just aerated underneath layers and break compacted layers. We also had some, I didn't go into it, but we had, because if working with sand, we had, according to recommendations that we get basically for farmers, they are the one who expert in it, some knives and over the leg of the subsoiler in order to increase its effect on the subsoil effect.
I just want to clarify, maybe you mentioned this at the beginning, that this is bioclogging that's causing it. It's not introduction of fine sediments.
Well, it's an orchestra.
Yeah. And the reason I ask is because if you're just ripping fine sediments, I mean, the fine sediments are going to continue to compile in that, whatever that ripping layer that you're ripping in. I mean, eventually they'll keep building up.
Effluents are basically contain organic materials, almost no like mineral materials. So we're not praying about accumulation of tin in the ponds, okay? What's actually happen when you operate the ponds incorrectly, mainly reducing the time of dryness between wetting cycle, okay? Then you start to accumulate biocrust, okay? Which actually very hydrophobic and is the one who creates, I think, the effect of clogging. Now, if you let it dry, okay, and that's what I mentioned before, that we, during the last year, okay, we did some major change all over the plant, okay, let it dry. Even though we had excess of effluents, we instruct the people who turn on and off the faucet, when the ponds dry, let it dry for 10 hours at least, or 12 hours. Even you have excess of effluents, throw it. I don't care. Let it dry. Okay? So when you let it dry and you operate it correctly, this is, I think, a major key. Now, the tillage is just I think it's a second key, but it was managed to break a compacted layer that was developed for many years due to discus, due to the plowing, due to some other like long-range processes.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And I think there was one question over the back as well, and Peter, you've got a question too. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts over the longer term, maybe 5, 10, or longer years? Will you have to remediate the zone that you till, or do you think you can do this for 20, 30? Do you have any feel on the time
It's
scale?
worked for 40 years already, more than 40 years, 45 years already. I think when you operate it correctly, we can work at least another 40 years, but it needs to be operated correctly. Sometimes when it's work, and it did work in the last 10 years before the crisis, then people didn't give attention for it. even though you offer some experiment and everything, then no, it's working, leave it. So I don't see why it won't work in the future.
So your experience is that ridges and furrows do not work, because that was proposed in the ISMAR in Adelaide as a means to reduce the clogging in basins. And now you demonstrate, or well, it was not your intention to demonstrate that, but your findings indicate that it would be counterproductive to have ridges and furrows. Can you comment a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I can. We had argument about it before. Many favor the plowing or other plowing method that creates these furrows and ridges and say it's okay, that's what recommended. I was against it because what you see actually in the field, okay, is that in the furrows you see accumulation because it's a little bit shaded, okay? And you see accumulation of crust there. You see the accumulation of organic matter. You see the development of crust. So the mechanism of increasing surface area on one end and the mechanism of infiltration in the furrow and let the air out in the ridges just doesn't work. On the other end, when the soil surface is like this and you want to tillage, then the tractor is not even. One knife is in the air, one knife is very deep, and it's just a very superficial work, okay? So that's how I explain it.
Okay, if there's no more questions for Ido, join me in thanking all of our speakers this afternoon. That's the end of this session. Now, all of the speakers are still here, so if you do have any burning questions, by all means, I'm sure, just corner them and they'll be happy to answer any of your questions. There is a plenary session on after the afternoon tea, and by all means, everybody is welcome to attend that plenary session. So, yeah, make sure you stick around for that. Thanks very much.